It was 2:12 a.m. when my phone buzzed on the tray beside my hospital bed. I blinked past the dull fluorescent light above me and answered. Her voice came through, too steady to be real. "Dad," she said, "I'm getting married. The house and car are gone. Goodbye." Just like that. No "how are you?" No pause. Just a verdict handed down like a bank notice. I didn't ask questions. Didn't gasp. Didn't plead for details. I'd spent 72 years learning the difference between emotion and reaction. And this moment, this betrayal, didn't deserve both. "I see," I said calmly, adjusting the pulse monitor on my finger. There was silence, as if she wanted drama, closure, a reaction she could hang up on. But I didn't give her that luxury. Instead, I said, "You forgot one thing." She hesitated. "What do you mean?" I let a quiet chuckle escape, the kind that only comes from knowing something the other person doesn't. That house she sold? It hadn't been in her name for 6 years. That car? A lease. Registered to my LLC. Something she never bothered to understand. She'd sold smoke and married into wind. The phone beeped as she hung up. I lay back in my hospital bed, the heart monitor steady beside me. Not because I was unhurt, but because I'd seen it coming long ago. She thought she won something that night. Thought she'd escaped her shadow by gutting the very man who raised her. But some things aren't visible until morning. And morning was coming fast. Why is it that the ones we protect most are the ones who forget what we did to keep them safe? By morning, the nurse came in with a gentle smile, unaware the night had rewritten my legacy. "Any family visiting today, Mr. Carson?" I just smiled. No, not today. Because my only daughter had already made her final visit, over the phone. And her goodbye wasn't made of tears. It was made of transactions. The house she claimed to have sold, it was never hers to begin with. 3 years ago, after my second heart scare, I moved all major assets into an irrevocable trust under my late wife's name, Emily Carson Trust. Everything that once had my signature on it was filtered through protective hands. Hands my daughter never knew existed. Why? Because I loved her too much to let her ruin herself with entitlement. But she did it anyway. I reached for my tablet beside the bed and pulled up the real-time notifications. The supposed buyer of the house had just wired a $410,000 deposit. Poor man. He thought he was purchasing a lakefront family home. What he actually bought was a civil lawsuit waiting to happen. And the car? She must have handed over the keys and a smile, thinking charm could erase paperwork. It would be towed by 4 p.m. I emailed my attorney a single line. Trigger the freeze. Let her explain that to her fiancé. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when the child you raise turns around and trades your blood for a better guest list. She used to sit on my lap and trace her fingers through my beard, calling me her home. Now I was just a forgotten clause in her rush to a new life. But homes built on fraud collapse on truth. She didn't know the weight of what she triggered, not just legally, but spiritually. I didn't need to ruin her. I just needed to remove my silence. Is it still betrayal? If the person betraying you thinks they're winning? The thing about my daughter? She never learned to read fine print. Not in contracts. Not in character. She believed signatures meant ownership, even when the ink wasn't hers. I watched the sunlight filter into my hospital room as I replayed her words in my mind. The house and car are gone. As if they were pieces on a board she was entitled to move, because she thought I wouldn't get back up. What she didn't know was that months ago, I'd started preparing not for death, but for disappointment. You see, after Emily died, something in our daughter shifted. She began to see me not as her father, but as a vault. Not as someone she could turn to, but someone she could turn over. Her visits grew fewer, her smiles thinner, her questions always about things. Is the house still in your name? Did you ever fix the paperwork for the Benz? I saw a buyer looking for something lakefront. I noticed, but I stayed quiet. I started moving pieces in silence, like a man playing chess with shadows. I spoke to my lawyer, shifted all primary assets to the Carson Family Trust, protected by clauses even she couldn't imagine. I appointed a trustee, a woman named Lillian from Emily's side. Strong. No nonsense. Knew exactly what a daughter could become when grief turns into greed. I even changed the deed on the lake house to a historical preservation property, unable to be sold without foundation approval. No matter what she signed, no matter what paper she waved, she had no authority. Yet she sold it anyway. I imagined the fake smile she must have worn to the closing office. The forged confidence. The handshake. The champagne bottle already in the car, ready to pop. But nothing in this world pops louder than a returned wire transfer. Or a court summons. And those were both coming. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I believed in lessons. And some daughters, no matter how well raised, don't learn from love. They learn from law. As the 4 clicked quietly beside me, I smiled again. She thought she emptied my pockets. But she never even found the vault. What kind of person sells a home that never truly belonged to them in the first place? That evening, while the machines around me blinked in rhythm, I received a text, not from her, but from an unknown number. She's crying. Says you tricked her. What's going on? No name. Just a number. Probably the fiancé. The one she chose over everything. Over me. He must have expected a broken old man, gasping for forgiveness. What he got was a silence, so loud it made him ask strangers for clarity. That's the part they never understand about fathers like me. We don't slam doors. We open escape hatches and watch what they do with them. The next morning, my attorney, Ms. Burke, visited my hospital room. Efficient, sharp, eyes that had seen too many families break over the scent of money. She tried accessing your emergency accounts, she said, placing a sealed envelope in my lap. She failed authentication 3 times. Then she left the branch crying. I didn't flinch. What's this? I asked. The full log of her attempts, plus a recording. She raised her voice at the banker, called you senile, claimed you wanted her to take over. I stared at the envelope and didn't open it, because I didn't need to hear her voice accuse me of weakness. I'd heard enough in her silence over the years. The birthdays she missed. The dinners she left early. The way she called only when her rent was due. Still, I never revoked her emergency contact status. Never removed her from the healthcare forms. Because some part of me still believed maybe she'd come back on her own. Not for what I owned, but for who I was. But now she had revealed what she truly valued. Not my life, just my ledger. I reached over, slowly pulled out the hospital's checkout forms, and signed for early release. Against doctor's advice. Against common sense. Because I needed to see my house again, not to protect it, but to reclaim what it meant. It was never about the property. It was about the principle. It took me 32 slow steps to reach the front door of my house. The same house where her height was marked on the pantry door. Where Emily's laughter once echoed off the hardwood floors. Where birthdays were loud, messy, and full of meaning. Now, quiet. The key turned, but the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a crime scene. Not of theft, but of memory. She had emptied it. Paintings gone. Curtains changed. Even the quilt Emily made, stitched with our initials, had vanished. Sold, maybe. Or tossed. But she'd left one thing behind. A note on the counter. Scrawled in her handwriting, forced and furious. You always cared more about things than people. Congrats. Now you can die with your things. I stood there for a long while, letting the words linger in the air. It was strange, really, how a daughter could become a stranger under the same roof that raised her. I walked slowly to the living room, where the armchair I used to nap in remained untouched. Beside it, a family photo from 15 years ago. Me, Emily, and a little girl with paint on her cheeks and a toothless grin. She used to hold my hand tighter than gravity. Now she called my existence a burden. And yet, even in this moment, I didn't feel anger. Just clarity. Because betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the silence. In the choices people make when they think you're too weak to notice. I picked up the photo frame, dusted it off, and placed it in a box labeled Keep. Only a few things would make that cut now. My lawyer called later that evening. She's trying to file an injunction, Ms. Burke said calmly, claiming emotional distress. Wants access to funds she believes she's entitled to. I sighed. She wants the fruit of a tree she's been cutting for years, I murmured. I'm assuming you want to respond. I paused. No. Let the tree fall. Let her hear the sound it makes. Because this time, I wasn't chasing her love. I was burying the illusion. By Monday morning, the first wave hit her. Her joint card disabled. Her name on the backup account removed. The modest trust one had created for her future frozen indefinitely. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. You don't leave open doors for someone who walks in only to change the locks. Ms. Burke had everything in motion. Each step carefully planned, calmly executed. It wasn't about punishing my daughter. It was about protecting the man I'd become from the child I no longer recognized. She's calling again, Burke told me over the phone. She's frantic. Wants to know why everything's suddenly out of her reach. What did you tell her? That the man she thought she fooled was 10 steps ahead. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to hear her rage or crocodile tears. Because her panic wasn't about losing a father. It was about losing access. And somewhere along the line, that's all I had become to her. Access. I walked through the garden that afternoon. The same one Emily had poured her soul into. Roses. Lilies. Lavender. Still blooming. Still breathing. Even after she was gone. It reminded me, things rooted in truth outlast storms. My daughter's fiancé showed up unannounced the next day. I saw him through the window, clean-cut, nervous. A man who had clearly made a deal with someone who promised him a kingdom. He rang the bell twice. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. I don't know what she told you, he began, but she's scared. You're her father. I was, I replied softly. Now I'm her mirror. He looked confused. What does that mean? It means she finally saw herself. And she didn't like the reflection. He tried to speak again, but I gently closed the door. No arguments. No shouting. Just a man choosing peace. And when I turned around, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. The house was quiet. But for the first time, it wasn't empty. It was mine again. A week passed. No calls. No texts. Then a letter. Not from her, but from her attorney. Polite. Cold. Surgical. A formal request for mediation regarding withheld assets and emotional distress caused by abrupt financial disenfranchisement. I sat with it for a while. Let the words sting. Not because they hurt, but because I had seen it coming. You raise someone with love, guidance, and sacrifice, and they call your protection a prison when it no longer profits them. So I opened the drawer beside my desk. Inside was a letter I'd written 2 years ago. Not meant for her. Not originally. It was something I began writing the day I sensed she was slipping. Not physically, but spiritually. The day she first rolled her eyes when I mentioned her mother's name. The day she said, "Why do you always talk like you're in some old movie, Dad?" It was titled, "For When You Forget Who You Are." I had written it thinking maybe one day, when I was gone, she'd find it and remember. But now, I placed it in an envelope and had it hand-delivered. It read, "You were not raised to trade love for leverage. You were not raised to turn inheritance into identity. I gave you everything I had, but I never meant to give you entitlement. The house was a shelter. The car, a convenience. My trust was the real gift. And you sold it, not in paperwork, but in principle. So now what's left is yours, not the assets, but the emptiness. If one day you come back not as an heir, but as a daughter, my door may still be open, but only if you knock." I never heard back, but I wasn't waiting anymore. Instead, I sat in that garden chair, tea in hand, sun on my face, and felt something I hadn't in years. Release. Not from her. From the guilt of letting her become someone I couldn't protect her from. 3 months passed. No lawsuits. No apologies. No visits. Just silence. The kind that stretches between people when all words have lost meaning. The world didn't end. No storms came. Just life, quietly rearranging itself around what was no longer welcome. Then one morning, as the trees outside turned the color of Emily's favorite shawl, I received an email from the county assessor's office. A house, the one my daughter thought she sold, had been flagged for a fraudulent transfer. The supposed buyer? Suing her, claiming misrepresentation, demanding $410,000 in damages. And the kicker? The case would be public. Not because I orchestrated it, but because truth doesn't need revenge. It simply needs time. She would stand in court, not as a victim, but as a cautionary tale. The fiancé, long gone, took what little remained and left quietly, like smoke escaping a burning room. And me? I sat in that same garden, clipping dry leaves, humming the song Emily used to hum while planting. A neighbor walked by. "Mr. Carson," she smiled, "you seem lighter these days." I looked up, truly smiled, and nodded. Finally stopped watering weeds. You see, my justice didn't come in a courtroom. It didn't need shouting or spectacle. It came in watching my world grow back, slower, softer, and without rot. She thought she could build a life on stolen ground. But nothing rooted in deceit ever blooms. I updated my will that week, removed her name, replaced it with a scholarship fund, in Emily's name, for daughters who never had fathers to fight for them. Because legacy isn't what you leave behind in bank accounts. It's what you plant in people you may never meet. And as I signed the papers, I whispered one final thought. She said goodbye like it was the end. She had no idea. It was the beginning of mine.